During the Cold War, the United States government conducted a series of experiments into mind control, creating sleeper agents, and engaging in supernatural espionage. The program was known as MKUltra, and it ended in 1973. Or did it? Welcome back to Critical Theories, and today we're diving down the rabbit hole of illegal human experimentation, government secrets, and surprisingly cool code names. Let's get into it. MKUltra was a program run by the CIA from 1953 to 1971. But before we can talk about that, we need to discuss Project Artichoke. After World War II, the newly formed Central Intelligence Agency was looking forward to the future of espionage. The world of spies had changed with the rise and fall of Nazi Germany, and the United States found themselves ideologically and militarily opposed to their former ally, the USSR. In 1951, they found themselves at the advent of a new Red Scare and a fresh wave of technological advancement. The CIA stood at the front lines of American defense. Thanks to Operation Paperclip, many Nazi scientists and their research had been brought over to the United States. The Nazi Research Division was notorious for their less than savory experimentation and strange focus on supernatural or at least unorthodox goals. And so it was that 4 years into their existence, with the help of these Nazi scientists, the CIA developed the identity they would come to be known for: upright, forthcoming, and trustworthy intelligence. Just kidding. They immediately started conducting morally dubious activities that may or may not have had the best interest of the American people at heart. Before we go any further, we would like to remind you, dear audience, that this part of the video is entirely verifiable. So as things get crazy, remember, this really happened. Project Artichoke had one primary goal: mind control. During their experiments into, shall we say, alternative interrogation techniques, the agency began looking at the bigger picture. Could they compel a person to involuntarily give up state secrets? And if that was possible, could they compel someone to do other things? Specifically, could they make someone involuntarily attempt an assassination? With that question resonating throughout the project, the race to develop the perfect Manchurian candidate began. The methods implemented were unorthodox and extreme, but they would become commonplace within the agency over the coming decades. In order to accomplish their mission, they began experimenting with hypnosis, forced addiction, and chemical compulsion. They attempted to force their subjects into vulnerable mental states, such as developing amnesia, hoping to manipulate them during blackouts and moments of mental instability or weakness. While some of Project Artichoke was conducted at home, much of the experimentation was done overseas, specifically across Europe and in Japan. The documentation explicitly states that agents were to conduct their operations primarily on people from other countries. After 2 years of mixed success, the CIA made 2 key decisions. First, they were going to ramp up and expand the scope of their experiments. Second, they were moving the operation back stateside. Why experiment on people around the world when there were so many potential subjects right here at home? MKUltra was officially birthed in 1953 and was the combination of both Project Artichoke and Project Chatter, a series of experiments into developing a truth serum and other chemical agents for use in interrogation. From the very beginning, the project utilized illegal methods of experimentation with complete disregard for the safety of their test subjects. Many, some would argue all, of their subjects were unwitting or unwilling participants. Some were misled in what kind of treatment they were being given or what experimentation they were a part of. Many were not told at all. This is not to say the project was performed entirely in secret. On the contrary, MKUltra was somewhat public knowledge, or at least the fact that drug experimentation was being performed was public knowledge. The agency would recruit subjects by telling them that they would be given all the psychedelic drugs they could handle, as long as the government was allowed to monitor the effects of the drugs. This was partially true. They were giving the subjects all the drugs they could handle. LSD was the primary chemical agent being deployed during the proceedings, and subjects were being absolutely overloaded with the stuff. What they weren't telling them was that they were also being subjected to intense interrogation and oppressive indoctrination tactics while they were under the influence. According to one of the Nazi scientists absorbed into the project, the goal was to eliminate the will of the person examined, and while the tactics did not work the way they expected them to, the project was objectively successful. Subjects of MKUltra would go on to be very influential in the theater of American history, and not always in good ways. Ted Kaczynski, better known as the Unabomber, is believed to have been radicalized by his time in the program. Some argue that his actions were directed and ordered by an outside source, continuing the tactics used in the program. Similarly, Charles Manson was a subject who found unfortunate success replicating the tactics on other people after being released back into society. There are dozens of other examples of subjects of MKUltra being influential in some way because of the impact the program had on them. As alluded to earlier, not all of the test subjects were willing participants. In fact, a large of the majority were not. Initially, the majority of unwilling and unknowingly involved parties were agents of the CIA itself. Many agents were dosed with psychedelics such as LSD and mescaline, and subsequently followed as the side effects of the drugs were documented. One of the most questionable test subjects was Frank Olson. Frank had worked with the United States Biological Warfare Laboratories as well as the CIA. He had been involved or adjacent to many of the chemical experiments occurring during this time. During a semi-monthly retreat, Frank was covertly dosed with LSD by Sidney Gottlieb, the head of MKUltra. 9 days later, Frank fell to his death from a 10th-story window. Initially ruled a suicide, there has been extreme suspicion surrounding his death since it occurred. Many believe his death was intentional. While the dosing was in line with the methods of MKUltra experiments, the circumstances are rather suspect. First, Frank Olson knew things. Some could argue that he knew too much. Olson was privy to all the clandestine activities of the SOD and MKUltra. He was personally on scene for hundreds of interrogations performed by both the SOD and the CIA. During the Korean War, the agency began to suspect that he may be considering defecting from the US. In truth, it seems that the nature of the work he was involved in was taking its toll on him. The stress of being in the agency had caused him to develop ulcers. Having been involved in so many aggressive interrogations and covert activities, he seemed to be considering the moral weight of his work. In several instances, interrogations he was witness to ended in the subject being tortured to death during the proceedings. By all accounts, Frank was considering retiring or at least stepping away from the agency due to the weight of these events on his mind. Given the secrets and outright crimes he had witnessed, this was deemed unacceptable by those in the know at the CIA. Given all that has come out about the circumstances surrounding the career of Frank Olson, it is believed he was killed by agents involved in the program. Whether he was thrown from the window or he was compelled to jump, the result is the same. The program claimed his life. CIA agents and related intelligence operators were not the most disturbing unwitting participants of the program. Many of the people subjected to interrogation, drug testing, and indoctrination practices were people the agency deemed unlikely to be missed. Runaways, orphans, homeless people, and veterans were often high-priority targets for the MKUltra program. Some operations were conducted straight out of orphanages and hospitals that tended to transient and at-risk citizens. Across the United States and Canada, MKUltra was kidnapping people whose disappearances would not be reported, investigated, or in many cases even noticed. This group of unwilling participants seemed to have been subjected to some of the harshest tests the program had to offer. They were often pushed beyond their limits so that the agents could document how much a subject could be drugged, interrogated, or otherwise tortured before they experienced debilitating mental breakdowns, irreparable physical harm, or even death. These subjects were unlikely to be sought out, and were they to survive the testing, they were unlikely to be believed if they tried to tell their stories. This knowledge gave the agency carte blanche to do whatever they wanted to them. In their own words, these people were expendable. In 1973, the Watergate scandal occurred. Recognizing that President Nixon had recorded every conversation and phone call that occurred in the White House, the head of the CIA had a problem on his hands. Project MKUltra was about to be exposed, and there was nothing legal about the way they had conducted business. He ordered that all documents related to the project be destroyed. A full investigation into MKUltra was now impossible. However, this did not mean that an investigation would be entirely fruitless. Approximately 20,000 documents survived this purge. Somehow they were misfilled and were located among financial documents elsewhere. They remained unnoticed until allegations made by the New York Times prompted Congress to launch an official investigation into the program. A Freedom of Information Act request found these documents and provided all the proof that was needed of the CIA's illegal activities. Upon the completion of this inquisition and investigation, Frank Church, the attorney in charge, determined that none of the test subjects involved in MKUltra were properly informed, nor did they give consent to be involved. And so by 1975, MKUltra had been shut down and Congress passed legislation that would prohibit any further experimentation like that which was performed in the program. However, considering the CIA conducted their experiments in secret for over 20 years, many are not convinced that the program ever really ended. Oftentimes, these programs have been folded into their successors, and the secrecy has continued. Operation Paperclip allowed the continuation of the research done by Nazi scientists. These programs were then combined into projects such as MKUltra. MKUltra was disbanded, however their work is believed to have been continued into other, more outlandish projects such as the Montauk Project. The methods developed in MKUltra bear a striking similarity to the tactics used by the CIA elsewhere during the Cold War. Operation Condor specifically comes to mind in this regard. Under the direction of then-director of the CIA, George H.W. Bush, the CIA performed or facilitated kidnappings, interrogations, torture, and murder of left-leaning subjects all across South America. The exact number of victims is unknown, but many believe the number of people affected by these horrendous acts is over 400,000. So while MKUltra may be legally defunct, its impact continued to be felt across American clandestine activities for decades. Some would even argue that the project has influenced events that have occurred in recent history. Regardless of whether there is a functional successor to the program today or not, we can say some things for sure. MKUltra and the surrounding conspiracy have been verified, and the people's trust in the government has been irrevocably damaged. There is a direct line that can be drawn from these secret illegal experiments and the activities of the CIA around the world since the 1950s. The sickening and disturbing practices of the CIA will leave us all sleeping with one eye open, wondering what atrocity comes next. This has been Critical Theories. Thank you for watching.